Hi Sagittarius, welcome to your May 2020 Astro Update. It's Rena here. So, as a fellow Sagittarian, I'm always extra interested in these types of readings because I'm looking for my solar chart. And this is an important point to make. I don't do this very often, but this is for the Sun in Sagittarius as well as Sagittarius rising. However, if you are the Sun in Sag, remember that you do have a rising sign, and that will be your natal chart. And you would have to know your time of birth to be able to find that out, and that would give you a whole other set of transits. And this is I do personally. I do readings for people that cover the next year. Some of the important transits like eclipses, and we're having them in, Sag and Gemini this year as well. So you can check out below if you're interested in something that's precise using your natal chart. These readings are intended as a general kind of look at things, and I think that they can still be, somewhat useful because they, in some cases, they will be accurate. That the transit's actually occurring in a particular house, but just keep in mind that it may not be true 100% of the time, and there's no way I'm going to divide them into different decanates to try to make it more, 10-degree marks to make it more, what do you call it, accurate, because with the way that my mind works, that would just complicate things too much for me. So, in any case, May is a time, and isn't going to be different this year than any other, where the Sun is in Taurus until probably like the third week of the month, and then for Sag, this is the sixth house, so it's a very practical place, and it's interesting because Taurus is an Earth sign in and of itself, and it's in an Earth house. The sixth house is Virgo's house, so it's the house of health. And I would say, even more specifically, natural health, eating cleanly. Herbalism, I think, is attached to Virgo. And this is also the house of your work, the service to others. Whereas the 10th house is more career, which can be, to me, more of the success angle. It's the house of your reputation in the world. So, how are you doing? Are you making a name for yourself? The sixth house is kind of the nitty gritty, the down to brass tacks kind of a thing. And it also deals with your day-to-day schedule and things like that. So the reason that this is important is because it's an area that can organize your life. And so, given that Sagittarians tend to be very kind of fly by the seat of our pants and, very spontaneous and things like that, we need that balance to be able to do things that we're planning to do instead of just kind of winging it, so that we can really be more productive. That's what I was looking for. This is about productivity. And so having the Sun there can assist in giving you the kind of mindset, if you will. And it's funny because I'm talking about Mercury when I'm talking about mindset. And actually Mercury is also in that sector until the 11th. And so on the 7th, we have a full moon at 18 degrees of Scorpio. This is in the 12th house, and this is a water house. This is Pisces house, so we have this full moon, which is very much about intuition, and in this house that is associated with past lives, with repressed memories, with addictions and things that can derail you and make you a lot less effective, because you have these stumbling blocks, if you will, things that trip you up. And So a full moon can bring these to awareness, but they can also kind of like make it easy to let go of these things, especially if you are becoming aware of them. And so that can be a very psychic time as well, but letting go of what no longer serves you works as well. On the 11th, we do have Mercury going into Gemini, and we have these planets that are in Gemini, which is the opposite sign of Sagittarius. So that's the 7th house. Now, this means that the 7th house is your committed relationship. It can also be, now let's say you are somebody who has broken up with someone and you haven't been talking to them. Yes, it is possible, even though it's not Mercury retrograde, perhaps you will have some contact with that person. People do get back together that they break up with. So it might have been, or if you were like separated or something like that. But it can also have something to do with a legal matter. If you had any kind of issue that is connected to maybe shared resources. I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's anything recently. Yeah, I mean, back in January there was a lunar eclipse in your 8th house, and that can deal with perhaps a will or something along those lines, and perhaps you're really dealing with the contract. Mercury can be a contract, the legal side of things. The 7th house can be your one-on-one partnerships, like clients. If you work for yourself and you have clients, or even if you work for, let's say you work in a counseling center, and you're working for somebody else technically, but you have your own clients. So that might be indicative that there are going to be more coming in the next few weeks, because you're going to have a new moon here as well. And on the same day, on the 11th, Saturn goes retrograde. So this is the first of 3 retrogrades of planets this month. This will be in the 3rd house, and Saturn is going to go back into your 2nd house, your money house, in July until December. So you're going to have like a little bit of a taste of more of the Saturn influence in that 2nd house. Now, some people who are Sagittarians may go, oh no. Like if you, for the last couple of years, if you felt like your money situation has sucked, then you might think that Saturn retrograde there is going to just be more of the same. But remember that when you have a retrograde, it's not the same as when it's in direct motion, so the effects are different. And actually, I mentioned December, but that's only when Saturn goes back into Aquarius. It's actually going direct in late September. So, even with a planet like Saturn that has a longer retrograde period, it's not, so long that, things won't get back to normal. But I don't necessarily believe that it's going to be a negative thing when Saturn goes back into the 2nd house. I actually think you can capitalize on it, because you'll have already been dealing with these issues. So I feel like getting your finances, really on point is something to consider for the rest of this year, because right now it's at 1 degree of Aquarius when it goes retrograde in May, in your 3rd house, which has to do with your thoughts. It's the house of the mind, but also any kind of training. And you may be kind of like at a point, Sag, where if you're working for somebody else and you've been looking around and seeing that maybe coworkers have more opportunities than you, they have certain credentials that you don't have, you may be really thinking about getting some of the certifications that they have if it means that they make more money. You may really see how different their life is compared to, well, not life, but you know what I mean, just how much they make and things like that, and feel like if you could do what they do, you would be in a better position. But you have to consider whether or not you want to go that route. And that's, I think, another thing about Saturn, because it's about, Saturn rules the 10th house of career. So it's all about a person's success, ambition, and that kind of thing. And drive goes along with that. And when somebody is trying to maybe be something that they're not and do something just because they're looking for they look at other people and say, well, look, that person's happy, and look, and they have, we're in the same boat, we work for the same company, but if I had what they had, I would be like them. And I remember like that happening to me when I was working in a place, and I was trying to, make my decisions based on what I saw other people doing, which seems really weird to me now because I'm not like that. I mean, and I never have been, so I don't know what was going through my mind. I think that people can have a great influence on us, even if we think that we're independent thinkers. And I think a lot of Sages pride themselves on being, kind of their own people. But when you're kind of always surrounded by other people, and when you see it, I think, really what can happen too is if you see your boss kind of doting on people who have these certain credentials, and you feel like they don't respect you as much, that can be like an unconscious reason to do something, and it's not going to work, because really people who are, who give preferential treatment to others, it's usually not a logical thing. They're doing it because that person, reminds them of themselves and kind of validates them. And you might not validate them, so they might think, why should I encourage this person as much as that person? So yeah, something along those lines that have to do with your future can come into play. But also, I would say too, if you're a writer, because the third house can be writing, and, you have these ideas for a book, or maybe you've even started something, you might kind of restructure it and say, and I would even say with plot, maybe I'm going to have the character do this. Because once you write it, I've written a novel before, and it's kind of funny because going back and adding things, even if you're not like totally rewriting it, is kind of like, something that you have to really think about, because you can totally change the story if you, and if you don't want to, you have to be very careful about that. But yeah, so the third house, I'm trying to think of other things that this could relate to. Well, I'll just leave it there. I mean, so on the 13th, we have another like couple of transits that are occurring on the same day. Mars goes into Pisces, and that's the fourth house of home and family. And, it's so funny because the fourth house is very, the domestic side of life, and Mars is so aggressive. So, the mother is connected to the fourth house. What I was going to say about Saturn retrograde in the third house is it could have something to do with siblings. And so we have third house, fourth house. And with Mars in the fourth house, if there's something with an inheritance or a property or something, and there's some kind of conflict, Mars can bring conflict, the third house with the Saturn retrograde, there may be something going on with you and your siblings that you're kind of relinquishing. Maybe you're relinquishing responsibility for them. And you're like, no, I don't have to do this. This was never really my role in the first place. And and especially if you're somebody who's on the younger side, who, let's say, you're getting into it with your mother because she's, demanding that you take care of your siblings, and you put off going to college for that, to help her out, and you realize, something, this isn't my responsibility, and she can do it if she wants to. I'm an adult. I'm not talking about if you're a minor, because you're under the same roof. But if you're an adult and you've been living at home, perhaps, or maybe because of what has happened in the world, you were forced to come home early, and now you're being saddled with this kind of responsibility, you may really resent it, because you may feel like you're supposed to be a babysitter all of a sudden. So yeah, it could be something along those lines. I'm not sure. Very interesting. The other thing too about Mars in the fourth is it could be some kind of like renovation of the home. Maybe an addition, some kind of like construction. Also on the 13th, Venus goes retrograde at 21 degrees of Gemini. This will be in that seventh house of committed partnerships. So you have Mercury there, and then you have the Sun, but Venus retrograde here. So it doesn't mean that if you are someone who is committed to someone, that your relationship's going to deteriorate or anything like that. It can simply mean that maybe you're just kind of, the bloom may be off the rose in a sense if you've been living in kind of a denial state, but it's really also in general about your one-on-one relationships, which ones are meaningful, because again, Venus is about it's not just about love and monetary gain, but also about your values. And it may be that some of these close relationships are not, matching what you're looking for, and you have to be very proactive about it, and you have to make sure that you're not wasting time with people who are not supportive, because these types of relationships are not casual. They're more like if you have a close friend and things like that. But even in some of those cases, those relationships aren't going to last all the time. Sometimes they are rather temporary. And then on the 14th, we have Jupiter retrograde. But I want to say one thing, because as I noted for another sign, the Venus and Jupiter are both retrograding within a day of each other in May. And both Venus and Jupiter are considered benefics in Vedic astrology, which means that they, if you want to look at certain planets as heavies, like Pluto and Saturn and things like that, Mars and Venus and Jupiter are considered like these good luck influences, good luck charms, bringing pleasant experiences, love, money. Both of these planets are connected with money. And what I was noting is that it seems to me that in the last couple of months, based on what the world has been dealing with as a collective, that it's almost like we've been having this kind of retrograde activity in March and in April, rather than in May going on for, June and longer. So one of the things that I had read about Jupiter retrograde is that it can bring back opportunities that you did not take advantage of when they were there before. So, and I don't know if I'm correct about this with the Venus, but I think Venus can be about money coming back or having an opportunity, in an area, taking advantage of it. So I'm going with that, So if there are, for instance, if you work for yourself and you have noticed that you've had issues with clients, and maybe you haven't had as many clients, perhaps that will increase with Venus retrograding in your seventh house, where some of them, you reestablish connection with some of these relationships, because Venus can be your social network, I guess you could call it in a sense. And the other thing too that I was thinking about was the fact that we have been having our economic system impacted in terms of like the delays, and May is the time when things were supposed to start to get back into motion. So that could bode well for the world economies as a whole mid-May, because that seems to be the target date of some of that. So yeah, very interesting. So with the Jupiter retrograde, it's occurring in your second house of earned income. So, oh, and Venus actually rules the seventh house. So I could see like there being money connections to this. So perhaps if you had some opportunity to make money in a certain way, Sag, maybe that will reappear for you. And this time you will be better prepared, because, when we tend to not go for something, it's because we may not feel it's the right time for us. We don't have the proper training or understanding of what it entails, and so we don't think it's a good idea. And then we realize, oh man, I should have done that, or just simply we're busy with so much other stuff, and now we finally have that free time. So yeah, so that's really cool. And also, since Sag is ruled by Jupiter, if you find, since this is happening in the second house, that you feel that you still are experiencing that constriction with finances, and the same thing, and especially when, from the period of early July until late September, when Saturn goes back into that second house, then really look at what you can do in terms of affirmations and other kinds of law of attraction material. Because the reason I say that is because Jupiter and therefore Sag rule the ninth house, which is all about your philosophy of life, and also the kind of the spiritual, the God, the belief system. And I really feel like the belief system has a lot to do with law of attraction and that kind of thing. And people who are very, willing to question their thoughts and change their thoughts are the ones who make the most progress, or the quickest progress, than people who think that life is happening to them and they just have to cross their fingers and hope that, everything is going to go their way eventually. I don't think it works like that. So, but I do think that, I'm actually kind of looking forward to this. Before, I was a little bit apprehensive, thinking, oh, wow, not Venus is the only personal planet, but 3 planets retrograding all like within days of each other in May. But then when I thought about it, I said, this is mid-May, and this is the time when I think a lot, the United States will start to open up more. And so there's got to be something good with this. It can't be that it's going to slow things down. We've already had the slowdown. So, that's how I choose to see it. And then the new moon is on the 22nd at 2 degrees of Gemini in that 7th house of committed partnership. So, adjustments made in relationships this time. This is in the midst of the Venus retrograde. And it can simply mean that you are, maybe seeing your partner with new eyes, adjusting your own expectations can sometimes be important, but maybe you're deciding to do more things with your partner. And I think the Venus retrograde might even fit into that scenario, where you're kind of rediscovering yourself as partners, instead of just living under the same roof. So maybe it can be very romantic. Okay, that's what I have for you, Sag. So I hope that you resonated with this, if you would like a personal reading, please check the link below. I do mostly astrological readings, so, you know, see what I have and see if you like it. Take care. Bye.